Yes, good morning, everybody. And well, I say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. And thanks for joining this webinar. My name's David Tyler from the World Liquid Gas Association. And as people join, I'm hearing a bit of background noise. So if you do join, could you please mute your microphone and then we can have an uninterrupted webinar. I say uninterrupted, but we do want questions. So as you go through the first couple of minutes of this webinar, you'll see some tools in which you can place questions and send them through to us, and then we will field them. So I'll be moderating the webinar, which is going to be scheduled for an hour. I point out that it is going to be recorded and made available afterwards, so that if you've got colleagues who are unavailable to join, then you're very welcome to pass the link on to them later. We will make that link available after the webinar is finished, and also the presentation material that you're going to be seeing. So if I could just ask you to mute your microphone.
Sorry, David, you are muted. David, sorry, you are muted. Someone click on you're muted. Can you unmute yourself, David? Okay, let me try.
I don't know who muted me then. So I don't know where I was when somebody muted me. But
it's okay now.
It's okay. You can hear me now. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. Somebody tried to shut me up there, but so apologies for that. So what I was doing was I was giving you some background to this webinar. It's going to last an hour, and what we have in store for you is the following. I'm going to give some opening remarks and a brief introduction, and then we'll briefly dive into the guide itself. This is the guide, the WLGA guide for transferring LPG from a ship to road tankers. So I'll give a very, very brief introduction to the guide and what it contains, and then we'll have some contributions from yourselves, including the working group that worked on the guide. So what I want to do first of all is put the Slido link up. I know we're on an MS Teams call here, but we are using Slido to field questions. And the main reason for this is twofold. One, we had a number of questions last night from Brazil, and the Brazilians are unable to join us today. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning there. So they will listen to the recording afterwards, but they gave me about a dozen questions, which we have already loaded onto the Slido app. And I've asked the working group behind this guide to give some comments on those questions, and they have already been put on the Slido app. So if you can scan that QR code with your phone, you will go straight into the Slido tool. Failing that, you can join on www.slido.com and just put in that code 3571750. That will take you straight into the Q&A, and you can either put your questions there or you can use the MS Teams chat box. Thanks to my Paris team behind the scenes making this happen, and they will be sending me through the questions on my phone here. So a couple of opening remarks, and the working group I mentioned just now consists of these 6 gentlemen who were heavily involved in the drafting and the editing and the approval of the guide when it was released at the end of last year. So a big thank you to all of you. 1 or 2 of you are on the call today. And you'll see from the companies there that we're looking at shipping companies, we're looking at trading companies, distribution companies, all who have an interest in this practice of moving product from a ship to a road tanker. Briefly, WLGA has over 300 members around the world representing the full value chain. And this topic very much sits in shipping, trading, storage, and distribution. So you can see that we're covering a topic here that is very much part of our remit. And if you look at the vision and the 4 mission goals of the WLGA, you can see that safety appears in both the vision and the mission. So we take seriously, very seriously, safety. And as you'll hear as we go through this webinar, safety is at the cornerstone of this guide and this practice. This guide is one of a series. We've produced about 15 now since the first one was produced in 2009. And the topics range from all sorts of subjects, from cylinder management to filling plant operations, health and safety, and including bulk LPG installations. And you'll see that there are references in the guide to these existing guides because we're dealing with a process here, a procedure here that takes product from a ship directly into a bulk road tanker. Very unusual, something that we would not normally condone, but we recognize that it goes on. So it is not a preferred practice. We don't recommend it. We're not condoning it. So why are we producing a guide for it? Well, we recognize that it is being carried out in several countries and has been for many, many years. There is an absence of national and international standards that cover this process, this procedure. So a decision was taken last year within the core safety group to actually produce a document that actually is a document with recommendations on a procedure that we would not normally recommend. So our position on this is that you should not transfer product from a ship to a road tanker unless there are no other safer options available. So that's the cornerstone of this webinar and this guide. So we recognize it goes on. We want to make sure that whoever wants to consider doing it is given the best advice possible. So this is the position that we have. Just stepping back a little bit from the actual procedure, if we look at the exports globally of LPG around the world, they're mainly from North America and the Middle East. In fact, those two regions produce about half of the production, the supplies globally. The demand centers, on the other hand, are not in North America and Middle East. At the moment, the biggest demand center is in the Asia Pacific region, which consumes about half the LPG in the world. And we also have other potential demand regions such as Africa. And we heard a lot about Africa this week in Paris with the International Energy Agency summit on how to increase the use of LPG in Africa. So there are potentially new zones, new regions in the world that will be taking LPG. And it is this process that we're talking about that might impact those regions, and already does. So there are established procedures for the traditional ship to storage facility or ship to ship transfer. But as I said earlier, there's no real national standard or advice on moving ship to road tankers. So it is an exceptional practice, and it is high risk, and it needs a great deal of attention, and it involves a lot of people. So the first thing that the guide addresses is the need for a risk assessment on the whole operation. So this is a detailed analysis of where the risks might arise when you're doing this, and how you might mitigate those risks. And once again, continually ask, is this really necessary? Are there other less risky options available? Essentially what's happening, we've got the ship arriving at the jetty. We're moving the product from the ship into a static manifold on the shore side. And then we have road tankers taking that product from that manifold and moving off into the country where the demand centers are. So this is essentially what's happening here, and that whole operation needs to be thoroughly examined from a risk assessment point of view. So the guide addresses some of the risks and controls, and there are examples, and I'll show you in a minute a couple of examples of how we address some of those risks and what we might do to mitigate those risks. So these are things like ensuring that you've got the right safety distances, you've cordoned off the area, and during the operation, you continually check and double check to do reviews on achieving as low as reasonably practical your level of risk that you're operating with. Conduct emergency response exercises with the Port Authority. Well, it's quite normal if you're doing transfers within shore-based facilities to have response exercises with Fire Services Department. So this is basically what you're doing here is imagining what could go wrong, but not waiting for that. You bring in the fire services, you bring in the Port Authority, and you explain to them what's going to happen, and you review the sort of responses that they might want to give, so that if it does happen, you're not surprised. Using a risk assessment matrix is a useful tool, and there's an example of that in the guide. This is where you look at where those potential risks might be, and then you look at ways to control those and the impact it might have on the operation. Very, very important with this operation, with a ship arriving on the jetty, is the weather. Check and look at the weather forecasts and make sure that you monitor continually the weather condition. Especially in areas where there might be cyclones or high winds. And if there is any doubt about the possibility of weather impacting the operation, then you abort and move the ship to safer waters until things calm down, and then you can restart. So this is the recommendation in the guide. These are some of the control mechanisms that you can have for some of the risks. For example, I give one example down the bottom there, operator fatigue. This is something that's often overlooked, particularly in countries where there is high humidity and high temperatures, high ambient temperatures. Make sure that you have a good provision of drinking water. Make sure that operators, when they're not operating, that they're resting under shade, and rotate staff to avoid fatigue and repetitive response issues. When you're doing this operation, you need to have, first of all, the decision to take this course, and as I re-examine the need to do it. Is there any other way that you can do this other than a ship directly to a road tanker? And notify all the stakeholders involved, because you've got stakeholders on the ship, and you've got stakeholders at the port, and you've got stakeholders with the distribution company that's bringing the tankers in and out. You'll need to request formally a berth from the Port Authority, as it'll be a dangerous goods berth. And then you make sure that the vessel and the jetty perimeters are all safe to operate. So continually checking, and you can see the theme behind this guide is controlling and managing the risks. If you're operating or plan to operate at night, and this may well be the case because discharging from a ship to a number of road tankers will take time, then make sure that you've got the right nighttime operations available if you're doing that. There are then 4 steps, and there are 4 more slides, and then I'll stop. There's the process of what to do when before the ship arrives, and this is securing the permits and customs authority, making sure all the equipment's tested and certified and fit for purpose, and making sure, very important this one, making sure that the prime movers, the tankers, are in place 4 hours before the ship docks. And the reason that the guide is suggesting this is that what you don't want is the ship to arrive and then suddenly find out that there's no road tankers. Keeping a ship on a jetty is a very, very expensive operation if it's idle. After the ship has arrived, you hold meetings between the staff on board the vessel and also the shore-based staff, establish the demarcation zones and the safety zones. Make sure that the manifold system is properly anchored, and position all the fire prevention equipment and check the PPE, the personal protective equipment. Make sure that everybody conforms with that, and complete the safety checklist. Now, one of the questions that came through from Brazil last night was a question about a safety checklist. And in the guide, we do have examples of safety checklists. So that's something that you can interrogate later. And then finally, conduct the ship to shore safety checklist and sign off. So that's after the ships arrive. When the ships arrived and in place and everything's in order, then you can start the loading procedure. And again, check, check, check. Continually check for leaks during the loading operation. Check the earth wires to eliminate the risk of static electricity. And you can see the whole narrative here is check and double check and triple check. Monitor, monitor, and monitor. And then finally, before the vehicles are released, just check to make sure that everything is in order. So that's the loading procedure. Then after the loading has finished, remove the remaining liquid in the skid, the manifold and the pipeline. Disconnect so this is a decommissioning operation, if you like. Disconnect the ship to shore hoses, remove the anchors, and calculate the quantity of discharge product. So this is a commercial issue, making sure that you're getting what you paid for. And then finally, carry out a comprehensive debrief with all the personnel to review the whole operation that's just taken place. And the idea behind this is to identify areas for improvement and update any procedures. So very, very important, those last 2 points. And it actually reminds me, because what we plan to do after this webinar is take the questions that have been asked, look at the responses from the working group, and include that in an update to the guide to make sure that we're carrying those comments forward. So again, a continual improvement process, not just for this procedure, but also for our guide as well. So I'm going to stop there now. We're 20 minutes into the webinar, and what I want to do now is ask the working group for contributions, because one or two of them are online at the moment. So can I ask the working group members, can I bring in Blaise, for example, who I know was well, he was instrumental in the decision to have this webinar. He said that the document that we're producing is extremely valuable, but we need to make sure that people are aware of it. So Blaise, if I can bring you in, if you could unmute yourself, and maybe a couple of comments from you on the whole process of what we did with respect to producing the guide.
Thank you, David. If I can, remind everyone the objective of this safety core group of WLGA is the first to fresh up safety culture across the LPG industry, and to encourage atmosphere of sharing safety incidents. This guide, is part of our objective. As David said earlier, transferring LPG from a ship to road tanker is not a preferred practice, but we all know that it's being done in several countries. Reason why, even if we don't recommend it, it is, as a normal operation practice, it's very important to ensure that it's carried out in a very safety manner. And we at the working group, as I said, we share incident in order to learn from incident and ensure that it will not recur. But if we don't have to share incident, this means that we are on the good traps, because we avoid incident to happen in our operation. So, David, this is just a contribution that I would like to make. I think it's very important that everybody go through this document, which is very informative document, to learn how to carry out this operation in a very safe manner. Thank you, David.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Blaise. Let me just stop sharing my screen here for a second. There, I think that's. I hope that's worked. Now I recognize a few people on the call. Ranjan, welcome to you from India. Thanks for joining. I know that you weren't necessarily on the working group, but what are your thoughts on this whole process?
The best thing which I like about this guide and which you mentioned is that we don't recommend, we don't like you doing it, but since you are doing it, let us come out with some kind of procedure so that you may do it safely. That's a wonderful thing. That's a unique thought, I would say. Normally, we don't come out with a guide or some kind of a manual on something which we don't want people to do. So
Yeah,
I appreciate the idea, and I really hope it improves the safety of places where it is being done.
Thanks, Ranjan. And yes, I mean, it was mentioned to me that perhaps the guide might form the nucleus of some sort of international standard at some stage. But at the same time, what we don't want to do is necessarily condone the practice, and there is a balance here that we need to take. So we know it goes on. We know it has gone on in the past, and thankfully, I don't think we've had any incidents. And I think people are generally quite careful when they're dealing with something that's not normal. It's abnormal in terms of our normal operations, and yeah, so it's something that who knows, it might be the nucleus of something that is formalized later. Jean-Sebastian, I can see you there, and thank you very much for your input on this. And we had a lot of very interesting information and also photos, which we've included in the guide from yourselves. What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I think my first thought I'd like to share is that there is no cheap way to do ship to truck, right? So you can't cut any corner for all the reasons that David mentioned. The risk assessment, talking to the port authorities, understanding if there is an actual practical area where you can conduct the operation, but there is it's not a cheap operation by any means. And this is sometimes when I discuss with customers, the idea that, oh yeah, ship to truck, you bring the truck, you bring the ship along, and that's actually a cheap way to discharge. It's not. It's not, because there is a certain amount of equipment that you need.
We've lost your audio, Jean-Sebastian.
Okay, that should work now, hopefully.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, so a mobile loading gantry is an expensive piece of equipment. And of course, because you need to keep the ship alongside, that is also very expensive in terms of shipping. And as everyone knows, those vessels are costing dozens and dozens of thousands of dollars every day. So it's not a cheap operation by any means. It can be done safely, but it takes a lot of preparation, and hopefully the guide is going to help stakeholders and customers to have a better understanding of what's happening. There is one element, David, that actually I looked at this morning, and I'm not sure it's mentioned in the guide. When you deliver LPG into any given place, the LPG has obviously to meet the domestic specification of the country you're discharging to, and that includes the authorization. Now, it's pretty rare that the LPG is authorized on the ship for reasons that ship owners don't really like to have 18 mercaptan in their tanks, which means that in this case you need to have an authorization system in place onshore, which goes back to the point I was mentioning before. Having a mobile loading gantry with flow meters, with 18 mercaptan injection, all that stuff is actually quite expensive. So don't have it in your mind that ship to truck is cheap. It's actually, it needs quite a lot of resources to be deployed in order to do it safely.
Yeah, thanks, Jean-Sebastian. And handling ethyl mercaptan is also in itself a very risky operation, and something that has to be done very, very carefully. Can I bring in Duan Dennis? I can see you're on the call, Duan. Thanks for joining, and thanks for that feedback on those questions we had. Are you able to join us?
Hi, David. Yes, thanks. So yeah, and I've got to agree with every single thing that Jean-Sebastian has just said. Ship to truck discharge is the most expensive way to get product into an environment. and it involves a lot more costs and a lot more stringent requirements and work to get it done. So absolutely, with regards to mercaptan, some ships will do mercaptan blending on board, but not in the tanks. So as the product is discharged from the ship, they will blend. But again, the ships don't like doing it because it's not a happy task by any means, doing that kind of thing on board the ship at all. So you do need to, in some instances, you would definitely need to look at doing some mercaptan blending. It all depends on the ship operators. Ship to truck transfers have been done for a very long time, and thankfully there haven't been any major incidents. However, people do need to be substantially more careful in doing it. Your safety measures have to be, you've got to double down on everything, because you are transferring something from one of the biggest storage facilities you've got into a mobile storage facility like a road tanker, and the equipment that you're using and everything like that has to be better than what you would normally use. And that's where it goes back to, it is more expensive to do it that way, to do a ship to truck transfer. However, in developing markets right now, there's a lot of developing markets that are wanting to look at gas, bringing gas into the environments. There's island communities that have been in discussions. They don't have the infrastructure right now, and potentially the jetty infrastructure to handle a full shore-based facility. And this is where a ship to truck may become a necessary evil in the beginning stages. As it develops, they would then move to shore-based storage and develop the facility. So having the guide is not saying that this is the right thing to do. Having the guide is identifying that this practice does happen. It's not going to be stopped anytime soon because of the development in certain areas. However, you need to recognize that it is an activity that is happening, and we need to address it and try and bring people in line with identifying that the risks in this process are a lot higher than the risks in any other normal environment, a fixed environment, for instance. So definitely, and the equipment that's required, it needs to be done properly. It needs to be maintained, and it needs to be operated correctly. The staff have to be trained properly. You've got to have the manpower to monitor the situation. It's not a situation that you would allow to happen like normal circumstances where you have one man watching an operation. You have to have a big crew, and the ship's crew, the minute those pipes are connected to a ship, the entire ship changes in terms of all of your SIGTOW and shipping rules. So the entire ship basically comes on standby now because it's connected and it's discharging. Your safety factors increase, your safety distances from the ship increase the minute the hoses are connected. So all of a sudden, the entire ship's profile changes the minute you connect those hoses.
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. Now, you're now with Petrodec. Have you had any first-hand experience of this procedure within Petrodec?
We have been discussing some options in a number of areas. The Caribbean has been looking at some instances, and some instances in the north of Africa that have been under discussion. And then it's a case of, well, do we look at doing a certified portable, properly designed ship to truck discharge system? So Petrodec has developed a system that has actually been patented, a containerized system. So that has been done in the event that it becomes necessary. But the preference is always going to be on fixed installation first. Right.
So would that be involving some sort of ISO container facility? Is that what you're thinking?
It's all of your discharge equipment, all of the safety equipment, isolation, earthing, even portable fire systems and things like that with diesel fire pumps. So it's a whole containerized system for that. Then potentially you can then have your isotainers added to that, because for your blowdown, when instead of trying to push everything into a last tanker, for instance, and having those risks, you would then rather move that into an ISO type situation, which you can control and you can then deal with that at a later stage.
Yeah. And as I mentioned earlier, we heard this morning, earlier today, about the Paris outcome, the IEA summit, and the fact that countries in Africa, which probably have little to no existing infrastructure at the moment, may be looking at this as a possible entry. So I suspect that this procedure, although it's not necessarily common at the moment, I think it's probably going to be more common than it is. Would you accept that?
Correct. I think that is exactly what it is, and we've got to start somewhere. As I said, we've got to recognize that risk. We know it's happening. We need to identify it, and we need to start then addressing it and bringing it into the fold, so that people can then actually have a guideline in terms of what they need. Because in a lot of instances, when you talk to people in a number of developing countries, the very first statements are there are no gas standards in this country. Which becomes problematic. So you need to then have some form of guide that you can refer to and say, hey guys, well, look at this. This is going to guide you down the right path, making sure that the safety requirements are met, meeting all of the industry standards, and ensuring that it's going to be done. Because at the end of the day, the the ship operator are going to be the final people deciding whether they are actually going to park that ship next to the jetty and discharge into that facility. So if it's not up to standard and it's not going to meet the requirements and the safety standards, no respectable shipping company would park their ship next to that jetty.
Right. You made reference to SICTO, and there's a question that's come through that says that SICTO do provide requirements and safety of ship-to-shore transfer activities, which, and the question is saying, which is applicable for ship-to-road truck transfer as well. I think what you've said just now is that it's not. It's a totally different ballgame. So I think that's the answer to that question, and it begs the question about if this is going to become more common. Is there a need to produce, as Ranjan mentioned, is there a need to produce something more formal and perhaps look at a standard that is more recognized?
Yes, I think that would be the next logical step and something that would be required, because if you're telling people it's a guideline, people would normally look at it and say, well, it's just a guideline, it doesn't apply to me. A standard is a more formal approach, and the standard is more enforceable. So that would be the logical next step on it. In terms of, just to go back to the SICTO part, discharging into a static or a proper terminal has been designed correctly to manage all the pressures, designed to manage what's happening from the ship. When you're doing a ship-to-truck discharge, your biggest risk, right, in this instance, is overpressurization of road tankers. Rapid filling of road tankers without all of the correct setup and precautions could lead to overpressurization of road tankers on the jetty, and that's where it critically is different to a fixed terminal.
Right. Okay, thanks very much, Duan, for that. Has anybody else got any comments to make at this stage before I just review some of those questions that came through?
Can I ask a question to some of the gentlemen, Dwayne, or that has practical experiences?
Yeah, thanks, Morten. And Morten, you represent the filling plant industry.
Well, equipment. You can say equipment
industry.
Yeah. No. I'm curious to this because as we have a cryo activity as well, and we've actually supplied similar equipment for discharging LNG directly into road tankers, and here in Europe, and we use a system that can handle several road tankers in parallel. Is this a standard that is used in LPG as well, or a procedure in these cases, or is it one truck with one manifold in practical application?
Who would like to? Yeah, thanks, Morten. Duan, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I can pick that up. Hi, Morten. So yeah, what happens is it's the same. So in terms of your tanker discharge, it is solely dependent on the size and type of jetty that you are operating on. But yes, you can fill from 1 to 8 tankers. In terms of what we've got at the moment, you can fill between 1 and 8 tankers at a time, using the same setup. It's very similar, yeah. So you can fill multiple tankers. It's more that's determined by the space that you've got and the safety measures you've got in place.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Duan. Now I've got another question here that's just come through. For ship-to-shore connection, insulation flange is applicable to avoid sparks. Earthing cable is not applicable. What about the case of ship-to-road truck? So there's a question here on earthing, the risks of static ignition. Anybody want to comment on that?
You want me to answer that, David?
Keep going, Duan. You're doing a great job.
All right. So on your ship to truck discharge, you need to have insulated flanges between on the hoses from the ship to your truck discharge facility. Insulated flanges are to prevent electrical discharges or electrical currents, stray currents going from the ship to the shore facility, or from the shore facility back into the ship facility. So your insulating flanges are installed on that. On the jetty, all of your discharge of your loading equipment, your hoses and everything like that needs to be earthed to the jetty itself. So there's no continuity of electricity between the ship and the shore. However, on the jetty, you need to make sure that everything from those flanges is actually earthed to prevent any issues with the loading procedures like a normal facility.
Yes, and thanks, Duan. And the another question. This is from Brazil overnight. The question is, what is the best method to avoid generating electrical discharge when connecting the vessel's hoses with the land manifold? So I think you've covered that. But we had some feedback from one of the other working group members on this, to use hoses with earthing connections in them. So this is an intrinsic facility on the hose itself. Electrically discontinuous flanges between the ship and the shore-based discharge equipment to prevent stray charges from ship to shore and ship to shore equipment. All shore-based equipment must be correctly earthed. All hoses should be class 1 electrically continuous hoses, and correctly specified bonding cables are to be used at all times. So I think you mentioned that just now, Duan. These are questions that are came through last night from Brazil, and I promised that I would deal with them. They're actually on the Slido app, the questions, and also some feedback that we had for that. And then there's some specific, this is a series of questions here. What are the ideal parameters to carry out the transfer more efficiently? Flow rate, speed in the pipe, pressure, temperature. And the recommendation is for the flow rate not to exceed 80 cubic meters per hour, depending on the design of the truck. The speed of transfer in the pipe should be below 5 meters per second. The pressure not more than 12 bar out of the ship pump, and truck tank should be gassed up as soon as possible so that the flammable atmosphere within remains for a minimal duration. Another question that came through was, is there a limit to the minimum pressure in the vessel's tank at the end of the transfer process? Sorry about this detail, folks, but the questions have come from Brazil, and I just wonder whether there's a thought to use this process or this procedure up in the Amazon Delta, where I know the draft is limited and they do use barges to move product inland. So in general, the vessel's tanks are never empty. Post the discharge, there's always some cargo left. The cargo tanks on gas carriers can be brought to about 20 kPa reasonably. However, this process is time consuming and ultimately leads to the delivery of product at high temperatures through the vessel compressors. Another one here. This is an interesting one. This is about new technologies. I mean, we spend a lot of time at the World Liquid Gas Association looking at innovation. You know, we have a number of competitions, such as the Global Technology Conference and the Global Challenge, which is the startup competition that we have. And we're always looking for new technologies that are being used to increase operational safety. And we had some feedback overnight from Mayank Bhatt, who works for BW Epic Kosan. And Mayank has had a lot of experience in ship-to-road tanker discharge, and is continually looking for ways to improve things. So his response to that question was this: the installation of, and this is all examples of new technology that you can apply in the future, the installation of thermal, optical gas imaging, ultrasonic cameras, infrared and electrochemical gas detection sensors, CCTVs, conducting gas dispersion studies for incidents, induction of automatic emergency shutdowns in the cargo skids, use of hoses equipped with cable-connected wedges, plungers or flapper valves located at each end of the hose that can stop the flow of product from both the source and the receiving tank within a second without human intervention in the event of a hose rupture. Disconnection or separation are some of the new technologies being used. So there's an example of some new technology that's being applied in this area, and that's from a ship owner. So thank you, Mayank, for that. Okay, do we have any more comments coming through? I'm looking at Tamsin here.
So David, if I can just quickly go back on the hose issue that these guys have raised as new technologies. There are hoses in the industry that are used. One of the brand names, and I'm not punting anyone, we haven't used them in a long time, is Smart Hose. Smart Hose comes, it's exactly that. It's a complete hose system, which has got the breakaway. It's a full breakaway hose. It's got the isolating flanges on the hose, incorporated in the hose. It's got the breakaway with isolation with the cable. So once the hose pulls apart, the cable actually then pulls the excess flow valves on both sides and closes the entire system. So it's a hose that's got everything incorporated on it. They are substantially more expensive than standard Class 1 hoses. However, it's giving you everything you need in a single package. So there's a number of hose companies, even Yokohama does them, that incorporates all of those safety features for you from the start.
Right, thanks, Duan. I have a funny feeling that we've come up with Smart Hose in the past, and it may well have been a GTC submission. If Nikos is on the call, he might remember. But certainly, that's exactly the sort of thing that we search for in our innovation programs. And yeah, so if you haven't heard of it, folks, and you want to look at your hose configuration, then I don't think Duan is getting commission on this, but Smart Hose is worth a look, I think. Thank you, Duan, for that. Okay, I'm just checking to see whether any more questions are coming through from Slido. I think not. Does anybody have any questions coming through on the chat? Let me have a look. Okay, so thank you, Tamsin, for doing this. The chat has the Slido code in there, so if you haven't already logged on to Slido, do so. And if you want to have a look at the full guide, then that's available on that link in the chat box, and that's in a flip book format. And it's about 40 pages long, and it'll be longer now because we're going to put some of this material in that we've had from this webinar into the guide when we update it. And Ranjan, you put in there, need to address the mercaptan dosing issue in the present guideline. Certainly we can add that in as well. It's a very nasty product. Somebody can't find the Slido link. Okay, well, look, what I might do now is just quickly put back up, if I can. I'll put I think if you bear with me. Now that, I hope, there. So have we? Can somebody let me know if you can see
Yeah,
the
we see it.
QR
We can see it.
QR
Yes.
code? Yeah. Okay. So let me. There we go. So that's the QR code for the Slido link for those of you that can't access it. And the alternative is to get onto the web and type in www.slido.com and put that code in, and you'll then come up with the questions that have already been logged by the Brazilians overnight, and a couple we have come through this morning. Okay. So what I want to do as we close, I think we've exhausted the questions, and if you have any more, then please use that link, continue to use that link. It'll stay open for another couple of days. And what I want to do is show you the safety corner, which is what we have on our website. The safety corner is a library for all our guides that we produced over those 15 years that I mentioned earlier, including the guide to ship to road tanker transfer. So there's the link at the bottom of the page. But I think if you get onto your web browser and just type in simply safety WLGA, then you'll find this page that comes up. Scroll down, and then you'll have access to the codes and the guides that we have produced over the years. What I want to do now is, as we draw to a close, I'd like to ask you to go on that Slido link, and there is, apart from the Q&A, there is a survey, and what I'd like to do is an exit survey. So what I'd like you to do is have a look. It's a poll. So have a look at the poll, and there are 4 questions. So the first question is, what sector of the LPG business are you from? So that gives us an idea about where you are representing the industry. How useful did you find this webinar? Would you be interested in attending similar webinars covering other subjects? And what other subjects would you be interested in? So these are very simple questions. If you could go onto that poll in that Slido app and answer those questions, that will be great. It will give us a bit of feedback. And where it says other, maybe you can just pop in the Q&A box just a comment to say that you'd like a webinar on cylinder management, for example. So I'll leave that there for a second or two while you and I can see that we've had several people already doing that. Thank you very much. It's so important for us to understand whether we're doing something that's of use or not, and whether it can be replicated with other topics. This is a very unusual topic. I did not expect a big audience for this, but I think we've had about 40 or 50 people log on. So thank you all for attending. It's been very informative, and thank you for the working group members who have contributed to some of the answers to the questions that have come up. Okay, so we got nearly 20
I think we got
people.
more, David. We had up to 75 people logging in, so it was.
Well,
Yeah,
see? Well, I can't
you
see
are
Jean
modest.
Sebastian.
You're modest, but no.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that's not indicative of the interest that people want to do this thing, because what we said at the beginning, this is something we do not want to promote. And if you are going to do it, then yeah, be very, very careful and follow the guidelines that we're giving. So yeah, look, thank you all for coming and joining this. It's really been interesting, and it just demonstrates, I think, that, well, first of all, just in summarizing, I think the comments that Duan made about the fact that this process, this procedure, is probably going to get more interest rather than less interest as we move forward. There's 1 billion people in Africa who do not have access to LPG, and many countries in Africa have no infrastructure in place to distribute the LPG to a market that's not there. And this is when we talk about the chicken and the egg, which came first. And companies like Petrodec and Vitol, they will be reluctant to invest in a country where there is no demand. But at the same time, you need to have demand to justify that expense. How do you get that demand without the infrastructure? So this is a question that I think we need to address, and maybe this is something that that we can use to try and bridge that initial introduction of LPG into the country. And it's not just new markets. As I said at the beginning, it's also the circumstances that you might find yourself in. You may have a single storage vessel in a land-based facility which needs to be maintained, it needs to be requalified, and it has to be taken out of service for a few weeks. How do you continue to supply the market during that period? And it reminds me back in the 1990s when Shell was building an import terminal in Colombo in Sri Lanka, and it was about 18 months from completion, but they needed to get product into the country. So they adopted a ship to road tanker discharge procedure for about 18 months. And at the time, everybody was a little bit surprised because they knew it was a high-risk activity, and it's something that Shell probably didn't want to do, but was forced to do commercially. And I remember the team came out from The Hague to thoroughly investigate all the risks involved in conducting that operation in Colombo until they were fully satisfied. All the mitigating measures were put in place until they were fully satisfied. And then they started the ship to road tanker discharge procedure. And that was going on while the new terminal was being built. And that terminal is now obviously completed a couple of years later, and is still there and supplying the market. And the ship to road tanker procedure is no longer necessary. And I think that's the point here. It's something that if it is one of those measures of last resorts, then let's do it as best we can, as safely as we can. And once we get to a point where we don't have to do it anymore, when a shore-based facility is in place, then we can stop doing it. And so I think that's my sort of finishing comment. We've finished about 5 minutes early, but that's fine. So my finishing comment would be, I hope it's been useful, this webinar. I hope you've had some interesting feedback from contributions from our working group members as well, and thank you all for that. And yes, I think the only other comment I'd make is I'll have a look at the results of the exit survey and see whether this is something that we can replicate again on another topic. And in the meantime, I think my comment to you all is to thank you and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.